Coming to you from the heart of the Diocese of Savannah, this is It's Catholic, y'all! A series of conversations about faith and life. Views expressed in this podcast do not necessarily represent the views of the Diocese of Savannah. This episode contains mature themes which may not be suitable for all audiences.
Good afternoon, my name is Braylon Snow. I'm the Assistant Director of Communications for the Diocese of Savannah. Today I'm joined by Eric Groth, the executive producer of Wildcat, a recent film about Flannery O'Connor. The film was directed by Ethan Hawke and starred Maya Falk. Eric is the president of ODB Films, an award-winning not-for-profit Catholic film company whose mission is to foster an encounter with Christ through artfully made, spiritually rich films. Since 2005, ODB has produced 250 short films, including the 60-film video catechism series for teens and young adults. Its first feature film, Full of Grace, which received a Gabriel Award for Best Family Feature, congratulations, and in partnership with Sony Pictures' Paul Apostle of Christ, which opened in more than 30 countries, earning $33 million plus worldwide, and several accolades, including Christopher and Gabriel Awards. And then in September 2020, Eric helped launch Renovo Media Group, an Iowa-based film company that has worked as the executive producer for our Sunday Visitors OSB Talks. Eric has been married to his wife Becky for 33 years, and they have 8 children. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you. And a granddaughter on the way.
Oh, very exciting. Congratulations. That's wonderful. Well, this is a long list of things to discuss. You've been busy.
It's been a joyful journey. Absolutely.
It's been, about a month since the release of Wildcat. And we're obviously here in Savannah. This is very near and dear to our hearts. Flannery O'Connor's, we like to claim her as much as possible.
You should. You should.
Yeah, especially here. Publication, she actually used to write for us at the Southern Cross. So we have a connection there as well. But before we jumped into talking about Wildcat, I would love to hear about your background, how you got involved with filmmaking and, from start to start to now.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was very practical, right? Like for us, it was, it was twofold. It came out of an experience I had in my parish growing up. And it also came out of looking at a tremendous need in the Catholic Church, especially as we were rolling into the 90s, and so I grew up in a parish that it was the place we wanted to be on Sunday nights. Very active, very great youth ministry program. 500 teenagers would show up on Sunday nights at our church in the suburbs of Chicago. And our youth minister for the, so just not to date myself, but that was the late 80s. And so our youth minister in the 80s he was very innovative, is as innovative as you can be. And his passion was preaching the gospel to teenagers, to Catholic teenagers. So he would use slide projectors, shadow mimes, screens, boom boxes. They do these multimedia presentations with Christian songs and I remember just being very intrigued and realized that we can be creative when it comes to presenting gospel messages, And so I was a 16-year-old teenager, also played baseball, trying to decide what direction do I want to go with my life. But the Lord really grabbed my heart. And I, gave my life to the Lord, of my own doing, pre-confirmation. And then just kind of went on this path of what do I want to do with my life. And I really wanted to get involved in ministry to teens. So I went to college, played baseball in college, studied Christian education, got my master's degree at Franciscan University in Steubenville, Ohio. And then I worked, my first job was at a Catholic high school in Rockford, Illinois. And I was the campus minister and I coached sports and taught religion to sophomores and seniors. And we're doing programs, and this is the 90s now, and technology is a little more accessible for non-Hollywood people. And we just started making little short films that we were using in Bible study, in retreats, at conferences, in events with our teens. And I really enjoyed it as a communication tool for the gospel. John Paul II, St. Pope John Paul II, in his final apostolic letter, with the rapid development. A rallying cry for us was, there's one thing he said, everything possible must be done so the gospel might permeate society, stimulating people to listen to and embrace its message. And so we took that to heart, and we said, well, let's use the tool of film to communicate the gospel. And so I left the high school. I worked with a national ministry called Cultivation Ministries. We were putting on rallies for teens and dioceses all over the country. We were making the films that we were using in those programs. And I've always thought like the Catholic Church, when it comes to like innovation in terms of technology, has always kind of sat about 10 years behind the evangelical church, and so when I would be searching for things to use, I couldn't find anything, which was part of what made us go, well, then we just have to make our own stuff that we can really take to our Catholic teens. And so a phenomenon that started to happen time and again at these conferences is after we were done with the events, desperate youth workers like myself would come up to us and say, where did you get your films? And we'd be like, well, we made them for the program. And then the next question was always, can we have them? And so we started sharing the films we were making at events. And in 2005, we launched Outside the Box, ODB Films. And for the sake of creating short films to help Catholic teens know, love, and serve Jesus. And in the first 10 years, we were not for profit. We made 250 short films for Catholic teens, distributed them to 3,000 parishes in the United States who were very active with their youth ministry programs. And on the heels of very generous donors, at that time, things were not online. It was DVDs. So we were sending out quarterly DVDs with lots of films, and we sent out 30,000 DVDs for free to churches and schools all over the United States to use these resources as a way of evangelizing their teens. That the big program that we did that you mentioned in the intro was we created a video series we called the VCAT, where we took the Catechism of the Catholic Church and created short films for each section of the Catechism for teens. And then ultimately what happened was we had one question we had asked of us a lot about film, about content was, do you have any films on Lives of the Saints? And we never really explored that in great depth, so we decided to do it. And we decided to go down a path of making films on Lives of the Saints. So the first one we made, we didn't think we were making a feature film, but God had other plans, was a film called Full of Grace. And we released that in 2016, 10 years after the resurrection. It's a beautiful reflection on what Our Lady's life, what her role would have been in the lives of the apostles after Jesus died and rose. And that ultimately, we ended up selling that and getting distribution in Walmart and Target and online and other places. And that led us to connecting with Sony, who we did a film, Paul Apostle of Christ, with Sony, and got, pretty worldwide distribution with that one. Which led us to starting Renovo Media Group in Iowa, which led us to launching our first film from Renovo, which we just released in May, Wildcat. So there's the journey. And ultimately, it started because I had someone in my life who thought, I'm going to be creative when it comes to ministering to young people. And then that led us to seeing a need and just trying to create fill a void for resources for Catholic youth workers.
Jumping into Wildcat. So obviously, like I mentioned, Flannery's a big deal around here and in certain niche Catholic groups.
And I think she's growing more in the mainstream. But so how did Wildcat come into the picture for you? Yeah. And then did you have any background with Flannery before this film?
I had very little background with Flannery. I think like if people, I have found in our journeys over the last couple of years that the Flannery readers love Flannery, and I call them Flannery freakosauruses. Like they're all in, and I love that and I love talking about this film with people who love Flannery. And then, but I've never found any real middle ground. Like people don't know her, or they do. They love her, or they're like, they read one thing and they were done, and I read one thing, but I wasn't done. I was very fascinated by it. Like so many people, I think if you read one thing, you probably read A Good Man Is Hard to Find. One of her dominant short stories, right? And so leading up to this film, I knew of Flannery, for sure. I knew she was very important, 20th century, 50s and 60s. Devout Catholic, in the Southern Gothic, Jim Crow South, you know, and I knew of her. She kind of surfaced again in a negative context when everything George Floyd happened and cancel culture started to kick in. And so we're canceling Dr. Seuss and we're canceling Flannery O'Connor, icons who have defined in many ways the way we think about things and process things and look at things and so I knew she was important. And I'll say there were three reasons. I can tell you from the producer perspective why we got involved. It might be interesting for me to also share with you how the film came about from Ethan and Maya's perspective.
Sure.
And so I can do that too. From the producer perspective, again, there were three reasons. I love my Catholic faith. I love producing films that really make people think and reflect on a deeper level. I'm not a big fan of just the Christian films. There's a lot that I'm not a big fan of because I don't think we are presenting viewers with a true and a deep look at the struggles and the difficulties of humanity. And ultimately, if we're willing, and Catholics, I think, are often more willing to dive into the messiness of life and the suffering. And I think if we do that, then we can look at the cross, and the cross makes even greater sense. Like, why do we need that Savior? Because we live in this fallen, broken world and state. And so I was very, as a Catholic, again, very fascinated by this person who has been stirred up in society. Some people know of her, some people don't. And also the fact that there really wasn't anything produced about her. Like John Huston did a movie several years ago, Wise Blood, one of her novels, and I think The Life You Save May Be Your Own. I believe Gene Kelly played the main character in that way back when. So it's just some little moments, right? But there hasn't been a lot about her. So the combination of she's a very important person. We could tell a fascinating story in a fascinating way, and she's a Catholic, and I want to explore that. That was one of the practical reasons. The other two reasons for me were I was always an Ethan Hawke fan. He and I are the same age. In college, I saw Dead Poet Society, which was one of his breakout films, and as a late teenager, and I followed his work. I'm fascinated by him as a creative. But I'll tell you, Braylon, the thing that really excited me the most about the project was that it was a father and a daughter doing something together. So you had Ethan, this beloved son of the industry, just this authentic, everybody loves Ethan, and he's so good at what he does, and he does a variety of, he just presents himself as an artist in a variety of ways. But then his daughter Maya, known for Stranger Things and Do Revenge and other films. She was in 2 Academy Award nominated films last summer. And that they're doing this together. And I was really attracted to that. I'm a father, as you know, husband, father. Family is the most important part of my life. And when, an opportunity to watch a father and a daughter do something together and to be part of that was very cool. So the project came to us in September of 2021, and we initially turned it down. There wasn't a script written yet. It was an idea. The producer that brought to us, we knew him, and but we weren't ready yet, And then a year later, in September of 2022, he came back to us. He said, "We have a script. Would you be interested?" And so we read the script. We loved the script, and then we just went down a path in the fall of 2022. Decided to finance the film, decided to become a partner producer of the film. October, November, December, we were pre-production in Louisville, and then come January 10th, 2023, we did our filming, and then got it into post-production and got it into festivals and had our release. So it came to us through a producer connection, but for all those reasons, we were very attracted to it. The history of why it happened is because of Maya. Maya was 15 years old, and her literary teacher at her school, a private school, did a section on Flannery. And she really fell in love with this writer. As a matter of fact, the first thing that she read and was fascinated by was her prayer journal. And as you know, her prayer journal was written from the time Flannery was 18 to 22 years old, in that span, reflecting and having conversations with God. And Maya was very intrigued by this young woman who was, very close in age to who she was. As a matter of fact, Maya is the same age that Flannery was when she was diagnosed with lupus, as we made this film. And so she was very fascinated and attracted to a woman, a very creative writer who was able to deeply reflect on faith in a very unique way in what she did. As a matter of fact, when Maya auditioned for acting schools, Juilliard and other places, she crafted a 2-minute monologue from Flannery's prayer journal, and that's what she used to audition. And she and her dad helped. So she was very fascinated by, and then she went on. Maya's an amazing young woman, and she went on the hunt to find out who owns the rights to the Flannery stuff, because I want to play Flannery in a movie. And she's found Joe Goodman, one of our producers, and Joe had the rights from the Flannery estate to the prayer journal and to the novel The Violent Bear It Away, which gave him the rights to be able to produce a film. And once she found that, then she went to her dad. So Ethan will tell you, like, I work for my daughter on this one. So she went to her dad. She said, "Hey, I got the rights to this. I'd love to explore. Would you write and direct a film about Flannery?" And they went down to several years. And Ethan had read a little bit of Flannery. His mom sold college textbooks. So Flannery and Ethan's doing, very well read and reading, Walker Percy and a whole lot of other writers. And his mom said, "Well, you need to get a little female perspective in your life. Why don't you start reading some Flannery too?" And so he read some Flannery, and when Maya came to him and said, "Would you be interested in doing this?" He said yes, not fully knowing what he was saying yes to. Then he reached out to a writing partner, Shelby Gaines, and they decided, before they even really considered doing this, let's read her canon. So they spent 6 months just reading everything she wrote, all of her short stories, both of her novels, The Habit of Being, everything that it was written about her, by her, just to absorb, which was an amazing step. And then they got into the process of starting to write and draft how they wanted to tell her story. I'm not a Flannery expert. I mean, I've got a strong affinity for her now, and I've read more, but I wouldn't call myself an expert. I mean, I understand. Big picture, I understand why she did what she did and what she was doing.
Sure.
I think it's if I were to summarize why she did what she did, it's a line in the film very early on, as she's praying in church, and she says, "Lord, help me get down under things where you are." And I think, that's pretty neat.
I was very impressed that they kept the focus on the Eucharist so much in the film. I mean, with the revival going on, it's on our hearts and minds, but just, because to have them even have that in a major in a feature film talking about the Eucharist, that's a big deal.
That's a
So,
conversation in and of itself. That was my primary role as executive producer, and someone who deeply loves his Catholic faith and has worked in that space, was just this built-in opportunity, because by default, Flannery was a devout Catholic. So this built-in opportunity in this film for us to produce it in a way that shows the beauty of the church and represents the church well. So the spaces that we were using, we had Liam Neeson wanted a priest consultant to make sure he said the Latin right, to make sure he did his scene right. We had another priest in Louisville. They opened up. We met with the Archbishop in Louisville, and they were there. They basically gave us, you decide, you tell us what churches you want to use, and we picked the churches, and we taught Maya how to pray the rosary. So you were seeing somebody who was doing it the right way and making the sign of the cross the right way, and everything that was very important to us, to make sure that we kept the integrity of our Catholic faith presented in a film. Laura Linney, who's just remarkable as Regina and just a remarkable actor. She came up to me a couple of times and said and thanked us for paying attention to the Catholic stuff. She's like, I'm tired of being in films where they don't do it right, and it's not rocket science to get a consultant, she made the comment, she's like, when we're saying we're in a Catholic church, but we're using a Presbyterian church, like Catholics know when you're not in the right building, you know? And so, and then in the content itself, and that's a testimony to Ethan's background, the writing, to get the line in there. If it's just a symbol, to hell with it.
Oh,
One of
it's
my
in
favorite
tears
things
there.
she ever said. And
Yeah.
we're in that scene. If you look at it, you notice it's at a table. It's like they're at the Last Supper,
Yeah.
and you're moving in there, and that line comes out, and then she gives her an opportunity to do what she'd said, right? That people don't realize religion has a cost, and a lot of times we think it's a big electric blanket, but it's not. It's the cross, and you just linger on that as people are, and then you go into the next scene, and the courage it takes a writer like and someone in the industry like Ethan, to be able to be willing to do that. I don't know if you saw, we had so much press around this. It was so great. And in the Catholic space and in the secular space, we were simultaneously, Ethan's on Colbert on CBS at the same time Laura's on Jimmy Fallon on NBC live. And if you go online, if you get a chance, and watch the Colbert interview, and Colbert used, they both of these guys showed clips from the movie, and guess which clip Colbert used from the movie? That scene, which was
Well,
amazing.
Catholic. I know
Yep.
he's Catholic, so he probably, he might have had. I don't know if he chose it or someone on his team chose
He
it, but
chose it. He
did he?
chose it. Not only is he Catholic, but he also studied Flannery in university.
No
It was
way. I
part
didn't
of his flow. Yeah.
so
So it was really cool um, to your point, like making sure this represented who we were as Catholics and who she was as a Catholic perfectly was of utmost importance to us.
Yeah, there's so many Catholics that I can think of, like even Andy Warhol. He had a Catholic faith.
Yep,
Just so many people maybe you would never realize till later.
that's
But
right.
look back, you're like, yeah, they were definitely Catholic.
Deeply
And
Catholic actors over the course of history, artists, guys like John Wayne. These people had these profound Catholic faith that you never saw it because you saw them on the screen. And
yeah,
today you see it, you can see it more because we have so much more accessibility with the digital space, um, and social media, and you can talk more about things.
you recently did an interview with Ethan Hawke for members of the Catholic Media Association, available through the film promoter Carmel Communications. So if people want to hear more from both of you, I recommend checking that out. So can you tell me a little bit more about working with the team, with Ethan and Maya?
I loved working with our team. Just delightful. Ethan is one of the most authentic human beings I've ever met in my life. Deep philosophical thinker, deep spirituality, artist, and has a very childlikeness to him, where what he is working on right now, it's like the best thing he's ever done in his life. And it's super authentic. And this is a guy who's, Academy Award nominated. He's done 300 projects over 40 years in the industry. He was as a 14-year-old, his first movie was with River Phoenix and the Explorers. And then as an 18-year-old, he was in one of my favorite movies of all time, Dead Poets Society, with Robin Williams and that core of other actors, and Training Day with Denzel Washington, and, Boyhood, which they shot over 12 years. And he's had such a great run of films, and I've always appreciated his artistry. Such a great artisan, a man of the stage, a man of the screen. I mean, this is a guy who has done a lot of work and has worked with a lot of people, but and I have met a lot of people in the Hollywood environment, and he is someone who really, really cares about people, cares about art, cares about important things, and that leadership trickles down. So the environment on set becomes friendly and a place you want to be, you know. So it's my favorite part. It's a lot of work. They're long, usually 12-hour days, you know, and we're usually packing them in a 30-day span, 40-day span, a couple of days off here and there. But when you get the whole team aligned and you know you're creating something together, and even on a greater measure, when what you're doing brings the beautiful, the good, and the true front and center, it's a wonderful thing. And so it was very cool. I think my favorite thing was about doing this film. It was the fact that it was a dad and a daughter, Ethan and Maya, doing this together. Maya is super talented. You know, you get a lot of that criticism in the industry, like nepotism, like, well, the only reason she has the chance to do this is because of her dad. And I don't think there's an industry in the world where family is not helping family or giving family opportunity, but you still got to earn it, and you still got to be good at what you do. And she is a force to be reckoned with. Like, she's going to be 26 in July. She is one talented young woman. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, no doubt about it. But this is a young woman who could not have her dad in her life and be given an opportunity and would just shine. To see what she did for when you watch the movie as Flannery was profound, just profound. And it was fun to watch the two of them interact because they had this wonderful dad and daughter thing, but they were also very professional. You know what I mean? Like, Ethan would give direction in a scene to the cast. And then I would see him and he would walk over because I had the privilege of being there for almost all of the filming and, you know, being on set and being at the monitor. And then he would walk over to, you know, Maya, and he'd whisper something in her ear that everybody else wouldn't hear, you know, and then you'd see them be like, she would say like, "Oh, that's a great idea, Dad. You know, let's do that." Or she would say, "Hey, Dad, what if we looked at it this way? Or we tried it this way, or this feels right." And then Ethan would be like, "That's great, run with it." They had this great dynamic. And I've got to know Ethan's wife. She was one of our producers, and somewhat, you know, just the family. And yeah, Ethan and the language they speak, their language, their love language, their communication with each other is this world. It's doing this, you know. And they were just super kind humans, you know, like Ethan made the set a warm environment where people wanted to be, people were respected. You know, they weren't treated like a product or a commodity that could be replaced, but they were dignified. And Maya the same. Like, she really was a great collaborator. And they understand, yeah, I'm the main actor, and yeah, I'm the director and the writer, but there's a humility to know that for us to pull this off is going to take all 150 of us. Whether you're hanging lights, doing makeup, the lead, the director, the gaff, you name it, you know. And so it was a treat to watch professionals in the industry who are highly regarded in their industry, but to see them act with such kindness and authenticity and talent and ability was very inspiring for me.
The film is so beautifully crafted, and I want people to see it, so I'm not going to go into all of the film stuff.
Yeah.
But
It's very creatively made.
you stated your mission is to create Catholic films for atheists.
What does that look like?
What does that look like? Yeah, and I'll tell you, like, it is about the content for sure, but it's more about the reaching the people. And you reach the people through the two things, the content and the way we treat them when we're actually making films. So my favorite review from our Paul film was from a journal in New York called The Village Voice. And The Village Voice is often not very friendly toward things of faith. But the title of this review said, "It's a miracle, this atheist critic kind of likes Paul, Apostle of Christ." And so for me, I know, and we've made a lot of films that are very targeted at our Catholic space for very important reasons. But what's really rewarding to me is when, and it's not about proselytizing a Jew or a non-Christian, Muslim. It's not about proselytization. It's about presenting the transcendentals, the beautiful, the good, the true in a way that all people can watch the film. The atheist can watch the film and go, I kind of like that film. And so what, like, it's a filter. This atheist critic kind of likes Paul, Apostle of Christ. That really warms my heart, because for us, then I know we've accomplished what we need to accomplish, because I'm not interested in making films that just preach to the choir. I'm not interested. I know I can make films that Catholics will like, and I know I can make films that Christians will like, and I know, we can certainly go find Catholic actors and Catholic writers and Catholic directors and all of that. It's not interesting to me. What's interesting to me is the invitation to create something that all kinds of people can come around the table and watch and have great conversation about it. And so really that title, that claim it speaks into the personal and corporate mission of what we want to do, of what I want to do, what we want to do. And that is to create great content that can show the gospel in a new way to people.
So important. I mean, it's always important to do so, but especially in a time like this,
where there seems to be I would say
the enemy would have us think we have nothing in common.
Very important. For those of us who are watching who are Catholic,
how can we use the films to nourish and challenge our faith and to be able to share God with others?
That's a good question. When we were making the 10 years we were making films for teens, it was a very targeted audience, right? So teens and young adults, and then pastors were often using them for RCIA, because a lot of the adults who go through RCIA have a fourth grade catechetical level, and so the films that we created, very, very useful in that space. So if you look at our body of work, the short films, we did a documentary series called Restored Stories of Encounter, 30-minute pieces. All of that stuff can be really used within Catholic church environment, religious education, youth ministry, adult education. It can all be used there. It can be used on retreats and at conferences. The feature films, those are like, that's where we can get a little, courageous, and a little like grab a group of friends and say, hey, I watched this film. It's really interesting. Let's go see it, or let's throw it up on Netflix, or put it in the Blu-ray player or whatever, and have conversation. I mean, that's the hope. We've always felt, because we come out of a background of youth ministry, and knowing that it's about having conversation and dialogue. Like everything we've ever produced, every short film, Full of Grace, Paul, Wildcat, our Restored documentary series, we write discussion small group material to go with it. So there's and for the short films, they're 1-page PDFs with synopsis of the films and questions for discussion and ways to use them, and scripture references and catechism references. And then we set up Full of Grace and Paul for like a 6-week small group movie view, and then have conversation experience. And the Wildcat did a 4-week kind of thing with Wildcat too. So there's definitely ways that you can integrate. We also do what we call film and reflection events, where pastors will bring us in, especially during Advent and Lent, and we'll come to your parish community with one of the films. And we'll start out with stories, and then we show the film, and then we do prayer and conversation after the film as well. So there's a lot of ways your parish could do that. You could, whether you have one of us, or you could do a film and reflection night where you facilitate it at your church, and you get a license, which is a small fee to pay to use the film, and then create a community experience out of it.
Many Catholic filmmakers and artists, and I'm one of them, struggle with the question,
as Flannery did, so how can a person of faith
tell a story that is good, true, and beautiful when so much of life is ugly, harsh, and grotesque?
It's how can you make something that's raw and honest without, looking at the human condition without crossing the line, so to speak, indulging in maybe scandalous material.
Or maybe participation in the sin you're depicting. How do you judge that?
Oh, that's good. I'm going to say, because of the situation, because of our culture, because of where we are right now, it's precisely the reason why we need to create things that bring the beautiful, the good, and the true front and center. And so I believe we have to be courageous and willing to embrace the messiness of life. That's one of my criticisms of a lot of the Christian films that come out, that I just think they're too bubblegum, they're too clean, they're too simplistic. They're not necessarily willing to look at their, they don't want to dive deep and necessarily reflect on sin and sin in the world and the impact of sin and what sin does. And again, like I said earlier, like when we dive in and are willing to do that, it just makes reflection on the cross and Christ's suffering all the more intimate and all the more real and all the more personal. I'm also we cannot scandalize people when we make things. I think we got to be careful not to be. We can't be gratuitous. And really, I speak toward the use of foul language, the use of violence, the use of sexuality, especially the use of sexuality. We've gotten really uncreative in the use of sexuality in films. And it's driven us to be X-rated and everything, and so many things, because we're not creative enough, to show and imply and show the beauty. But I think we can't shy away from those things. We can't shy away from the sin in culture. But we got to be very discerning about how we present it. And that it has to be used in a way that really helps and is important in telling the story and being true to the story. But again, not doing it in a way that scandalizes. So Hollywood could care less, right? They're just going to do whatever they want. But I also think that's one extreme. I think the other extreme, which we see a lot in filmmaking from the Christian side, is that we're too clean. It's too safe. And it doesn't allow us to look at life in a real way. I think there's a balance, and it takes, I think it takes someone whose mind and heart leadership has been knows the beautiful, the good, and the true, and is transformed and is pursuing that, to be able to say, hey, this is the best way to present this in our story. And it's important. And I think especially in our culture today, with the digital media and rampant pornographic things, like, we especially have to be careful with how we present sexuality. I mean, we see how radically the devil has distorted that over the centuries, and that's something we have to be very, very careful with.
So how does your relationship with Christ affect your work, and then vice versa?
They couldn't be more integrated and intimately tied together. For me, there's no separation. Because I'm called to vocation, and I'm not called to be a filmmaker. I'm called to be a minister of the gospel, and I just happen to use film to do that. And so, and it's been a joy. My wife and I started dating when we were 16, and we've been together in ministry and filmmaking together and working this together. And filmmaking is not Dad's job; it's what our family does. It's who we are, and so. And there's always difficulties and struggles, but for me, it's it needs to be a total integration of my person, what we produce comes out of who we are, and it comes out of our listening to and reflecting on what's going on in culture. And ultimately, first and foremost, whether I'm discerning decisions to be made in my family or discerning decisions to be made in work, ultimately it's discerning. It's listening to the Holy Spirit. What do you want? I think a lot of times we have this tendency to put God in, we compartmentalize. We'll put God in a box and we'll compartmentalize. And like, I have my friendships and I have my family life and I have my work life and I have this. And ultimately, one of the things that I've been trying to learn over the years is like, God doesn't want to just be in his own box that, you take him out and you go to church on Sunday and then maybe you go to Bible study. But like, God is like, I'm in all of it. I want to be part of your family. I want to be part of your friendships. I want to be part of your work. I want to be part of the way you think about things, how you feel about things, how you decide on things. And so it's a 24/7 constant conversation that for me, I can't separate. That doesn't mean I'm like, I can't take time off. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't mean I can't relax and be a human being and not a human doing and celebrate Sabbath but for me, I don't see myself as two different people, a professional and having a professional side and a personal side. It's the same. The moments of the day, it's adoration, it's sitting before the Lord, it's receiving the Eucharist as often as I can. It's a constant, like, I don't want to do anything that the Lord doesn't put his stamp on, that he doesn't ordain, like, I don't want to waste any of his time. This is it's not my life, it's God's life. He gave it to me, and it's not for my, it is for me to, and life is meant to be filled with joy, and to experience the beauty of and the goodness of our Lord, but it doesn't belong to me. So it's that constant, like, what do you want of me? And the only way I can know what he wants of me personally and what he wants of me professionally is if I sit with him, and I listen. That still small voice, especially in a very cluttered and loud culture. So there's nothing we have done that hasn't been soaked in prayer in the process of leading up to making the decision to do it, in the process of doing it. I mean, even when we're producing films, we put prayer teams together, and say, hey, we're going to be filming from January 10th to February 14th. Can you guys pray a memorare every day with the intention of our film project? I want to get out of the way and just let the Spirit say, go this direction. I mean, I gotta work hard and use my intelligence. But everything is soaked in prayer. We make films not because I wanted to be a filmmaker. We make films because we want to communicate the beautiful, the good, and the true, the gospel, and the transcendentals and the gospel message in clear ways. And so to be on this path of working in short film and then to feature films and then now being on Wildcat, and to answer your question, set life can be really interesting. You bring a lot of personalities. I want to say we've had probably 150 people involved in making Wildcat happen. We had over 300 involved in making Paul happen. And so you realize there's so many different personalities, but that's part of what gives me the joy, because my mentality and my attitude as a person, but also as someone who is an evangelist, with the gospel through this kind of medium, is people first before the product. It's about that person standing in front of me. So I know when we get an opportunity to be on set and do a feature film, which is not often enough, there's going to be a lot of people there, and it's a great opportunity to be able to love people and care for people, and to just kind of set the path and say, this is how we're going to function. We're going to be servant leaders. We're going to work through the difficulties together in the positive way. It's just been such a blessing, like being on this journey, and when I was 16 and I mentioned I gave my life to Jesus, I came off of I was in reconciliation at a retreat, and I came out and I said, and I didn't say, but I really heard the Lord speak, and looked down. I was looking at a cross on the wall, and he said, I love you. How many times would I have heard that before? But for some reason on this retreat, it really clicked. And then he said, I did this for you. And again, I've heard that message so many times, but it was like the light bulb went out. But the thing he said after that kind of scared me a little bit was he said, I want your life. And I didn't know what that meant. Does that mean he wants me to be a priest? What does that mean? And you just you buckle up and you start to explore. And so it's been such a joyful, it's a journey that you certainly grind, and you're trying to figure things out and trying to figure out the right path and make the right decisions on all kinds of things in life and personally and professionally. But to go on a path where people first, then the product. So the environment is, when you think about like the analogy in scripture of the body of Christ, and the body has many parts. I have never had a better example of what a body of Christ looks like than working in film, because you have so many different parts and so many different people have to do so many different jobs to make it happen.
So what are some films, Catholic in nature or not, that you would recommend to everyone? Maybe one that's made an impact on you, or one that's just easy to watch that you like.
I so hate that question. I do. When you get asked the question, like, what's your favorite film? And it's so hard to decide. And I end up going like, well, how about if we focus on a genre? One of my favorite films of all time is Rocky. It's just such a great underdog story, such a great love story. There's so many beautiful things in there. I love The Mission. So the film, Robert De Niro, Jeremy Irons, Liam Neeson. Liam Neeson played a priest in that one. He plays a priest in our film.
Great sound.
Yeah, right. I have never, in any film, have I ever seen a better depiction of forgiveness than I have in that culture, in that moment where the natives come to Robert De Niro's character and just love him in spite of who he was and what he did. So profound and so powerful. I like Hacksaw Ridge. If you've seen that one.
Haven't yet.
It's a wonderful true story about the conscientious objector who did not want to carry a gun. And they're in the World War II in the South Pacific, and he saved 100 lives by running out into the battlefield and grabbing a man and bringing him to safety, and running out and grabbing one and another, and inspirational films like that. If I were to make the list
of my favorite Christian films of all time,
I don't think any of them would be really truly categorized as a Christian film.
Yeah.
It's things where the beautiful and the good and the true come out in the films, in the characters. And I know what's going to happen, Braylon, is after we get off the call, I'm going to think of like 10 other films. I'm like, oh, I should have told her about this one. The first film, it still inspires. The first film, it just made me think about things in a different way, was when I was a kid. The first film I saw in the theater was Star Wars, way back when. And I like filmmakers who are willing to take you on a journey to think about deep, substantial, very real, very human, not afraid to look at the divine.
For people who haven't seen Wildcat yet,
where can they go to view it? Online? Is it still in any theaters that you know of?
We're on the way out of the theatrical run, so we're almost 6 weeks. We are 6 weeks. I think by the end of June. So, we started in a small amount of theaters, and it ramped up to we're always limited release. I think we hit 200 theaters. It's probably in about 50 theaters around the country right now. To find out if it's near you, go to our distributor's website, Oscilloscope Laboratories. Big word. You might want to post that on the diocesan website. Put a link up there or something. But there's Oscilloscope Laboratories, and there's a link on there to our film that'll show you where it's playing right now. But after that, it's pre-order on Apple TV. It'll be on Amazon. It'll have a 60-day run where you can rent it or buy it, and then after that, it'll have a forever run on a streamer. So we haven't figured out exactly where, but it's like it'll end up on like a Netflix. So you'll be able to log in and watch it too. So, yeah.
Eric, I really appreciate you being on here with us. I know we want to support your work as much as possible, and we're excited to see what comes up next.
Blessings on the work you're doing in the diocese.
This has been an episode of It's Catholic, y'all. Visit us at diosav.org or on our Diosav social media platforms for more.